Hello, fellow true crime junkies. They call me Gypsy with an IE, and I'm here to give you guys a little follow-up on a case that I covered in my very first video on this channel. I shared the story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard, who was the victim of her mother, Deedee Blanchard's, child abuse in the form of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. If you want to learn more about how medical slavery destroyed this young woman's childhood, please take a look at this case with me. I have it linked below in the description box. But today, I wanted to share a little update because Gypsy has been released from prison after serving 8 of the 10 years that she was sentenced to. She was charged after she conspired with her boyfriend at the time, Nick Godejohn, to execute her mom because she just could not see a way out of her situation. And as I mentioned in that video, I eerily related to this case, as I was once the victim of childhood sexual abuse perpetrated by my mom's boyfriend at the time, and I was even contemplating doing something similar to my mom and her boyfriend at the age of 13 or 14. Now, there is a new interview that was released called The Prison Confessions of Gypsy Rose Blanchard, which was discussed on The View, and The View is an American talk show hosted by a team of ladies. They invited Gypsy Rose on to ask her how her life was going now that she is free, and to promote this interview for those who want to learn more about her situation. Unfortunately, I don't have access to the full interview at this moment, but I'm still waiting to see that because the interview definitely piqued my interest. I just thought I would share some insights from the View interview with you guys if you haven't checked that out yet. Firstly, I learned that Gypsy has an Instagram, so you can go follow her there. I'm going to put her handle up on the screen for you. From what I heard, she's got over 6 million followers, although by now she probably has way higher numbers. And of course, some of you might be wondering, where does Gypsy Rose Blanchard live now? Well, she currently lives with her husband in Louisiana. Yes, she is married. She's been married since 2022. At this stage, she's 32 years old. Her husband, Ryan Anderson, is a special ed teacher from Louisiana, and I'm going to tell you more about him in a little bit. He was the person who reportedly picked her up from prison upon her release at around 3:30 a.m. on December 29th, 2023. What a way to bring in the new year, huh? I have a quote here from People magazine in which Gypsy speculated prior to her release, "I know the home that I'm going home to is my husband, and I'm going to have a really supportive family dynamic." And I think that that's what I've been missing this whole time. And I'm inclined to agree with this statement. Now, on The View, Gypsy openly confessed that she did play a part in asking her ex-boyfriend to commit her mother's murder. She stated that she wants to talk about her story publicly so that she can be free of all of the secrets that she's been harboring and move on with her life. Surprisingly, Gypsy says that prison was good for her because it helped her acclimate to the real world. And as crazy as that might sound to some of us, I can understand where she's coming from. I mean, think about it. You're basically like trapped in your own version of prison, living in this world with your mom where everything, it has to be approved by your mother. You can't do anything, you can't feel anything, you can't think anything that is going to make your mother upset. So in the world of fear that she was living, because she's basically like her mom's captive almost. It's almost like when you think of people with Stockholm syndrome, it's like similar to that, the kind of experience that she was having with her mom. She didn't really know what it was like to just be a free person, even when she was a free person. Then when she went to prison, though they have many restrictions in prison, for her, prison was a form of freedom. So she was able to make her own decisions while she was in prison. So I can totally understand where she's coming from. People are not enforcing things on you against your will, other than, of course, you can't leave the premises and you have to follow the curfews and the rules of the prison, but overall, you still are making your own decisions while you're in prison. Now, they asked her what her mindset was under her mother's control, and she said that she was very submissive to her mom. She wanted to please her mom all the time. She described herself as a people pleaser. She constantly was thinking about how not to make her mother angry. Gypsy said that her mother's manipulation tactic was to just take her love away from her if she didn't do what her mother wanted. This is also something that I hear a lot of people who go through narcissistic abuse, they complain about, is that the person who is abusing them, it's a lot of emotional abuse that they use to keep you in line so they don't have to physically restrain you. I think this is something that we all have to really think about, putting into perspective and being more overtly discussed, because when we think of abuse, a lot of times we will dismiss when I say we, I'm talking about society. People in society will dismiss how serious abuse can be because they'll tell themselves, well, if you don't have bruises, if they didn't hurt you physically, if they're not beating you up, if there's no blood being drawn, then it's really not that bad. And this is such a scary thing to impose on other people, because sometimes emotional abuse is worse than physical abuse. It can make you just a shell of a person. It's like you're like a zombie just floating around, not really living, not really being yourself, because you're constantly trying to make other people around you who are abusing you happy, and there is no way to really make them happy. Whatever happiness they seem like they're exhibiting is very temporary, short-lived, and before you know it, you're back in trouble again because you're doing something wrong. And the something wrong may not actually be an infraction that's real. Like, sometimes it's just a perceived wrong, or the abuser is just making up stories. Like in my case, oh my gosh, my mom's boyfriend, who was molesting myself and my sister when we were teenagers, he was always trying to exhibit control over the household. So he would play strange mind games with us, especially me, because I was the one that was resisting all the time. One time he did this weird thing where he accused me of giving away my Walkman to some boy at my school, right? Which never happened. He told me to look for the Walkman in my bag. So when I went to go look for it in my book bag, lo and behold, it's not there. That's where I had left it last. So I'm telling him, like, I don't know where it is. And he's arguing with me that I must have given it away to a boyfriend. I don't have no boyfriend. I'm in middle school. What boyfriend? But no matter how much I'm denying it, he would keep insisting that I had given it away. At the time, nobody else was home. It was just me and him there. Because I wouldn't just give in to his perceived, or I shouldn't even say perceived, just his straight up accusation, he ends up slapping the hell out of me. I was stunned, right? Come to find out later on down the line, and this is like months later, we're moving out of this apartment, and as we're cleaning the place up, I discovered that this Walkman was hidden in a drawer that nobody ever looks in, because there was furniture pushed up against the drawer so you couldn't open it up. So this man went out of his way to steal my Walkman out of my bag and put it somewhere that he hid it, and then he accused me of giving it away to someone just so he could flip out and be abusive. What are you doing, right? Who thinks like this? But there are people who do these kinds of things to people and they just totally get away with it. The psychological abuse that he imposed on me wasn't even about him slapping me, although that was out of line, but he's trying to make me think I'm crazy. He's trying to make other people think that I'm like this little floozy who's just running around giving away presents to boys because I'm so boy crazy. What do you even need to do that for? It's so weird, but that was his way of trying to impose control over us. So I can understand where she's coming from when she's saying that prison helped her to acclimate to the real world, where it's not normal for people to act like this. So the hosts asked Gypsy what was her memory of the worst, the most painful procedure that she had to endure, and she said that was when her salivary glands were removed due to excessive drooling, but her mom was making her get like that because she would be like drugging her. She would give her medicine that would make her kind of unresponsive, sort of. So it would make her drool. And then this was a state that she would be in when she would take her to the doctors and say, oh, something's wrong with my daughter. So I did talk about this in my video discussing the whole case. If you want to learn more about those details, definitely go over there and watch that. The host also speculated, like, how did her mother convinced the doctors to do all of these crazy surgeries and procedures on her? Gypsy said, I don't even know. It's mind-boggling. I really don't even know how she did this, how she got away with this. And she talked about how for her, there's a lot of physical trauma that she is reminded of whenever she looks at her body in the mirror, because she's still living now with the aftermath of these procedures that her mother had the doctors do to her. She's got scars. It's very stressful knowing where this came from. You know, every time she looks at herself and she sees these scars, it's a constant reminder of what she was going through. That doesn't just go away. They asked her why she didn't ask for help, why she didn't tell people that she wasn't really sick instead of resorting to murdering her mother. She talked about how the first time she did run away, within only 4 hours her mom had found her, and then when she brought her back home, she chained her up for 2 whole weeks. And during that time, Gypsy was completely at her mother's beck and call. Like, she could not do anything for herself because she was chained up to the bed. She wasn't even allowed to use the bathroom when she needed to, so she said a lot of times she would just end up urinating on herself. And she was so traumatized and shocked by her mother's behavior. At this stage, she straight up felt like who's gonna believe me? What am I gonna do? I can't go to anyone because I'm too scared of what's going to happen if my mother finds me again or she discovers that I'm asking for help. There's another thing I was talking about in the video where I was saying, like, I totally understand where she's coming from because the same thing happened to me. I tried to ask for help, and when I asked my mom for help, She didn't even believe us. She was so brainwashed by her boyfriend that she actually believed that if there was any even inkling of some kind of sexual abuse going on, we must have brought it upon ourselves because, according to this guy, we're boy crazy and we're coming on to him. I know this sounds so ridiculous when you're a sane person, but if you're around a manipulative person like this, day in and day out, it is really like you're in your own prison with this person, and like whatever they say, you just start to believe it over time because this is the only place where you're getting any kind of feedback from. There's nobody outside of this household that's talking sanity into your mind, right? So she just felt too scared to ask for help from any authority figures or anything like that. And she also talked about how her mother was constantly in the room hovering over her when she would have doctor's appointments and surgeries, and the only time she wasn't there was when she was literally in the operating room. So how can I ask for help? She's the villain is right here in the room looking at me. What am I supposed to do? This is why, like, CPS, when they get called to homes, it's so important to separate the children from the adults and ask them questions when they're not in earshot of the adults that could be potentially harming them. I would even say maybe at school, instead of coming to the house, go to the child's school where they're in a safer environment and their parent can't just walk into the room, and question them there so that you have a higher likelihood of getting the truth out of them, you know? Because this emotional abuse, man, is so manipulative. It's so scary how much people can really influence someone if they have control of their mind. She was also asked how she felt about Nick Godejohn spending the rest of his life in prison, and she stated that she can't speak for Nick, that she has done her time and that he's currently doing his time, and that at the moment her priority is to focus on herself because she has so much to process. And according to some documents that were obtained by TMZ, it's reported that Gypsy's parole conditions prohibit her from actually speaking to Nick Godejohn, and she can't do it directly or indirectly through a third party. She can't talk to him through writings, text messages, emails, or any type of communication whatsoever. I guess she's still on parole. She's not just like clear and free. Probably in the next 2 years, I'm guessing, because her original sentence was for 10 years. So now that she spent 8 years in prison and she's paroled, that means her remaining time would be 2 years. So at least for that amount of time, she cannot contact him even through a third party. So it kind of makes sense that she can't really speculate on what's going on with Nick Godejohn. But I see all of the sympathy and empathy and understanding that the public is having for her, although of course you're going to get the knuckleheads who still are going to look at her like, well, she's a murderer, and that's just the end of it to them, you know? I think that this is a good sign that people are showing her so much support publicly, because if you're supporting Gypsy in this situation, then I feel like it's only fair to also support Nick. Ultimately, if Nick hadn't done what he did, then Gypsy would not be free. She would still have been under the tyranny of her mother and continually going through that abuse, because at the time when her mother was murdered, Gypsy was a legal adult. I mean, technically, she could have just left home. She could have just ran away. She didn't feel like she could do that at that time. You feel me? So we don't know what would have happened to her. Maybe all of these medical procedures would have ended up killing her at some point, and then her mother would have just got away with it because people would have blamed her sicknesses and illnesses that she didn't really have and thought, well, maybe it was just a natural cause of death. Who knows? Her mother was risking this child's life by putting her through this craziness that she was going through. I look at it like Nick kind of was her hero, and I'm not saying that murder is right on any level, but again, there is such a thing called self-defense, and in her situation, this was a form of self-defense. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, you can look at it that way. I look at it more like Nick was trying to protect her. And in his autistic mind, all of the mental illnesses he himself was suffering from at that time, I can completely understand why he took the steps that he took and thought that that was okay for him to act in that way. Gypsy herself admitted at the beginning of this interview with The View that she absolutely did play a part because she asked Nick to do this. I hope that this is foreshadowing for hopefully Nick Godejohn to be able to be released from prison as well. Maybe not as soon as Gypsy has, obviously, but I don't feel right with the knowledge that he might be sitting in jail for the entirety of his life for something that he did under these conditions at such a young age. That just doesn't sit right with me in my heart. It feels like it's just very wrong. So I hope the society will rally behind him when the time comes, and that Gypsy herself may be able to speak on his behalf later on down the line so that this man can have his chance at freedom and to just go on and live a normal life that I think he would be able to live with some help from his family and society. So then they asked Gypsy, how do you feel about your mother now? Like, do you miss her? And she said that at first she was really upset and angry when she found out about the things that her mother was doing to her, because she herself wasn't even fully aware of how much she was abused until court got involved and litigators were digging up information. You feel me? At some point she realized that her mother was suffering from her own set of mental illnesses, and this played a big role in how she was being treated. So she says she tries to take it day by day. She has a mixed array of emotions and is currently in psychotherapy, and she said that on the anniversary of her mother's death, she will sometimes cry while she's listening to her mom's favorite song. It's something she just does in private because she thinks people are gonna like judge her or think she's being a weirdo if they saw her doing that. But she has her own process for just dealing with her emotions. She says she does miss her mother and that she regrets what she did and how things played out, but this is her mom, this is her flesh and blood, this is the person who raised her, and she spent 20 plus years with her mother. So even though she was her victim, much like I was talking about earlier, much like people who suffer from Stockholm syndrome, I would expect for her to have these mixed feelings about her mother, where on one hand she loves her, she misses her, she's sorry, but then on the other hand she's angry and she's like, oh my god, I can't believe you did this to me. So totally relatable. And again, as someone who myself had to deal with all different kinds of childhood abuse, and some of that at the hands of my own mom, I can totally relate. I'm 38 years old now, and my mother is in her 60s, but to this day I have these feelings about my mom. Not about wanting to kill her, but I'm saying like anger and resentment towards my mom. Sometimes my mom will say things about that time in our lives where she almost sounds like she's blaming me for her boyfriend's child molestation tendencies, and it's like, what? What are you talking about? Like, she'll talk as if somehow she missed out on the opportunity to have some loving relationship because I would not let go of the fact that this man is a child abuser. That's hard to deal with as the victim when you hear people talking like that, but like, what can you do? I can't make you think the way that I want you to think. I don't have any guilt about my own issues and my own past, but I can understand if I had actually taken some action and did something drastic like Gypsy and Nick did, maybe I would be having those feelings of guilt now, even if I was free of that abuse and was just out here living my life. So I totally can understand. And I actually heard a conversation between some people that I know where this girl was talking about how she feels really guilty about exposing her stepfather's molestation of her because she felt like she was robbing her mom and her sister of their relationship with the husband and father of their life. And that was so hard to hear because the victims really should never blame themselves for things like that, but it happens. It does happen. The host also asked why she thought that her story was resonating with so many people and what she plans to do with her platform that she has just almost instantaneously earned upon release. Gypsy talked about how she's adjusting to all of this attention right now, which I thought was interesting because when she was with her mom, she was getting a lot of attention back then too. Locally, she was kind of famous because a lot of people knew that she was the sickly child whose mom was taking care of her, and that attention was part of the reason why I think her mother was behaving the way that she was behaving, you know? I think she was like addicted to attention from people. It's just interesting how Gypsy is saying that she's adjusting to all of this attention now, but I think that the attention now is probably explosive compared to what she's like nationally known now versus just local people knowing about her back then. She says that she is socially very shy and that she wants to use her platform for advocacy work. Someday she says she wants to work a regular 9 to 5 type of job, but for right now she just thinks that she's way too busy and that she has a message that she wants to put out there, that she wants to be the voice for the voiceless people and create change. And I think she's gonna do it. She's already doing it. She wants other people in her situation to learn that there are other ways out, and she does admit that she did it the wrong way, but there's definitely a right way to get out of this type of situation, so she wants to help people to learn how to do that. The interviewers also asked her what she thinks about people accusing her of using this situation as a means to gain fame. Gypsy stated that she's a really private person, that absolutely her goal here is not to gain any fame from her mom's death and her story, but she did say that her story was really important for her and that she wants to be an advocate, and if the only thing she can do from this is to help others, like that is her main goal. That's all she wants to do, and if nothing else comes of it, she's totally fine with it. I really respect her wanting to do something good from this tragic situation, and at the end of the day, I mean, isn't that what it is to make mistakes? When we make mistakes, though I hope none of us make such a grave mistake as this, the most important thing about getting through that is to learn from your mistake, and if you can, help other people to learn so that they don't make those same mistakes that you made and prevent these things from happening. That's what this channel is about, you guys. I've gone through so much weird stuff in my short 38 years of life, and a lot of that happened in my first probably 20 years of life, that it can't be for nothing. I can't believe that I had to go through all of that just to live in my own head with it, you know? So that's why I wanted so badly to start a channel like this, because it's not just about true crime stories and looking into these people's lives and jeering at it or judging them. It's more about, that could be me, that could be my neighbor, that could be my child, that could be anyone. All of us are susceptible to these crazy things happening in our lives when you run into the wrong peoples, and some of those people, they're just a part of your life because they're just there. God just put them in your life for some reason. I want to do my part to share these experiences with people so that they can learn from that and know I'm not the only person in the world that's going through this, even though I feel like I'm so alone and no one will understand me. If you look at like Elizabeth Smart, what she went through, and she was a child when she went through that, and look at the work that she's doing now. Totally, you would never expect for somebody who went through something like that to be able to be where she is today. So I totally respect where she's coming from, where Gypsy is coming from as she's talking about advocacy work. I really hope that these doors open up for her, because she really deserves that. And I think for her own healing, it's so important for her to be able to help other people. She would be helping herself in the process of doing this. Okay, so let's talk about her husband real quick. Like I said earlier, Gypsy has been married since 2022 while she was in prison. Her husband's name is Ryan. He's a special ed teacher. She stated that she knew him for about 3 years now, and part of the reason why she really liked him was because he's a very genuine person, and she joked that he's a great cook and that it was 25% of why she married him. Obviously, you know, based on him chuckling at this statement, he has a great sense of humor. He said that he wrote her a letter out of boredom. Him and a friend of his was watching the Tiger King documentary, and the friend was like, oh, I'm gonna write him a letter. So he was like, well, okay, you do that, and I'm gonna write Gypsy a letter. So that's how he ended up getting in touch with her, and he just never looked back. Ryan said that he watched a documentary about Gypsy's life, and he thought that she was really beautiful and that he loved her story, and so he wrote her telling her what he thought about her and that her story really touched him. And then he also said that he felt like it wasn't fair that everybody knew about her, but she didn't know about anyone else. So he started telling her about himself and his own life, and that's how he connected with her. And then she actually started writing him back. So this is how they built up their relationship. Guys, the internet, OMG, like, it's a lot of a-holes online, I swear. Like, toxic people just live online. You should hear some of the rude, disgusting, crazy, weird comments that I've seen people leave about this girl's husband, right? Would y'all stop it? Would y'all stop it? Just stop. It's so stupid. It's so ridiculous that these people are judging this man sheerly based on nothing. They don't know anything about this guy, but they're just judging him based on, a lot of them are just basing their judgments on his looks. I just think that's so asinine, so childish and stupid. Really? We're adults. Come on. I feel like this is a story of hope and a happy ending for many people who have these kinds of stories, especially in the true crime realm. We don't get to hear a lot of positive endings to these stories. And of course, Gypsy's story hasn't ended because she's still alive. She's still out here trying to start her new life. It's only been like a week that she's been free. It's just beginning, but this story is so important to share because it shows that there is hope and that things can be turned around for good, even if you're coming from a place of despair and sadness and loneliness. Gypsy, even back then when she was reaching out to Nick Godejohn, she wanted a savior. She wanted someone to love her just for the person that she is. I think it's beautiful that they built up this relationship without physicality and appearances being factored into the majority of their interactions with each other, and truly building on getting to know one another as people. I totally respect that her husband is a special education teacher, so I think he can also sympathize with a lot of this story from just coming from that aspect of it because of his own experiences working with children who may not necessarily be able to speak up for themselves and are struggling to just do mundane tasks, everyday things that people just take for granted on a daily basis. This is a story that personally I think is so important for everyone to continue talking about and sharing, because a lot of people with the mental illness of Munchausen syndrome by proxy specifically, they just slide under the radar while their victims suffer in silence. Gypsy cannot be and is not the only person or child that went through this nightmare, and we don't want to see anybody else die or suffer because of domestic problems that are just not talked about or known about by the masses. It's very easy to gloss over domestic violence, domestic issues, because a lot of times people will say, well, that's a family problem. That's not something for me to get involved in. That's their business. And it's not. Her personal home life trickled into so many other people's lives, you know? Her dad suffered because of this. Nick Godejohn is still suffering because of this. Gypsy was suffering because of this. The authority figures that were involved in the situation suffered in their own ways. It's more than just about the mental health part of it. It's when the mental health trickles into other people's lives and it's negatively affecting the people around you. We need to pay attention to these things, talk about these things. Don't shame people because they're talking about these things. Make it normalized to talk about these things, though they are dark, and yes, it makes us feel depressed when we hear these kind of stories. But our feelings are fleeting. They will pass. It's about the core, what is the problem here and how can we solve it as a mass, as a group. Any kind of abuse should not be tolerated, and as a society, it's all of our responsibility collectively to protect and to help the voiceless individuals who are oppressed by other people. I'm going to do my best to keep covering any updates on her story and to share with you guys whatever pertinent information that could help you or a loved one get out of this type of situation moving forward. And I do want to also stress that if you sense any suspicion that you know somebody who's dealing with this type of hell, please don't remain silent. Don't worry about other people judging you and saying you might be wrong. Like, remember the doctor who tried to speak up and other people kept telling him, oh, tread carefully, be careful, don't be making accusations like this if you ain't got the proof. It's okay to be wrong. It's totally okay to be wrong. I'd rather be wrong than be right and have not said anything. I think the guilt would just eat me alive knowing I could have prevented something like this from happening or could have stopped something like this from happening, and I just let my fear of other people's judgment stop me from speaking up and saying something. Please arm yourself with information and speak up. You could save a life or prevent an irreversible crime. Thank you again for hanging out with me in this dark corner of YouTube. I realize as I'm doing these these narrations, you guys, and I'm trying to work on it. I have Asperger's, so sometimes I can't tell how loud I'm talking or like my tone when I'm talking. People sometimes think that I'm like being sarcastic or condescending in the way I speak, but that's just my tone. That's just the way I talk. I'll start off being very relaxed. I'll be like, hello guys, thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the dark realm of humanity. And then before I know it, I'm like, yo, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like so hype, right? That's just because I get so into the topic. So I just end up getting that way. So I'm sorry if I'm hurting your eardrums if you started this video at 1 decibel, 1 volume level, and then you end up having to turn it down. But you'll get used to it once you get to know me further. I'm Gypsy Kim, and until we meet in the next video, please go share a smile with a stranger today. It's totally free charity. Have a great day.